The pinnacle of ambition, Emma Carter barely registered the mess of traffic and flashing billboards outside her office window as she stared at the Manhattan skyline. At just 32, she had become one of the youngest directors at Titan Tech, a billion-dollar technology powerhouse headquartered at the heart of New York City. Her journey to the corner office wasn't one of privilege or handouts. Born in a small town in Ohio to a single mother, Emma's ascent was carved with determination, late nights, and an insatiable hunger to prove herself in an arena dominated by older, often less capable men. Emma's reputation, sharp, resilient, restless, reached every department floor. She was the type who'd remember the names of junior engineers, who'd listen just as closely to an intern's pitch as to a board member's. Her management style was respected and sometimes feared for its intensity. But beyond the numbers and successful projects, Emma inspired genuine loyalty among her team, especially her deputy, Lucas Miller. Lucas, a talented and ambitious project manager, had worked with Emma for nearly 3 years. On paper, he was everything a modern executive sought in a lieutenant. Smart, innovative, a natural connector among different teams. Over countless brainstorming sessions and crunch-time product launches, they had built a partnership seemingly founded on trust and mutual respect. To the rest of Titan Tech, Lucas was both Emma's closest confidant and the executor of her boldest plans. This particular Monday morning, the entire company buzzed with excitement. The Aurora Project, a cloud-driven cybersecurity platform spearheaded by Emma, had just landed a long-courted federal contract, capturing headlines and turning Titan Tech stocks skyward. At the company-wide town hall, Emma's speech crackled with both gratitude and vision, a performance blending numbers, anecdotes, and hope for the future. Employees, those present in the glass-walled amphitheater, and those attending remotely, hung on her every word. Afterward, in the executive suite, Emma found herself surrounded by congratulatory emails, celebratory texts, and a flood of invitations to high-profile panels and media interviews. Even the often critical board members, grizzled veterans of Silicon Valley and Wall Street, finally acknowledged her as the architect behind Titan Tech's latest triumph. For a brief, sunlit window of time, it seemed absolutely nothing could threaten the heights she'd achieved. Inside her modern, meticulously organized office, marble desk, minimalist artwork, a single, healthy ivy plant, Emma allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. She reflected on the sacrifices, the obstacles overcome, and the mentors she had lost and found along the way. Yet, even as celebration echoed through the building, Emma's mind turned to the next phase. Her hunger to innovate was undiminished. Later that day, seeking a pause from the fanfare, Emma made her trademark rounds of the working floor. She listened to feedback, shared a joke with software developers, asked after a team member's sick child. In these moments, Emma's humanity shone as brightly as her ambition. Meanwhile, Lucas efficiently coordinated the post-launch chaos, organizing briefings, smoothing nerves, and relaying both praise and pressure from upper management. More than ever, Emma felt fortunate to have someone so capable at her side, someone who seemed to see and share her vision for Titan Tech. Yet, as the sun set over New York, painting the skyline in gold and amber, a subtle unease flickered at the edges of Emma's thoughts. She had climbed higher than she'd once dreamed,
Yes, that's what I heard
but
as
she
well.
understood better than anyone that the
Make sure no
corporate
one
world
sees
was
this.
fickle. Every summit cast a longer shadow, and success sometimes drew envy as fiercely as admiration. For tonight, though, Emma accepted the moment for what it was, the pinnacle of ambition, hard won, and, so she believed, secure, shadows after the spotlight. The euphoria that followed the Aurora Project's breakthrough began to fade as the work week settled into its relentless rhythm. Though congratulatory words still echoed through the Titan Tech campus, Emma noticed cracks forming beneath the surface. Something about the atmosphere had subtly changed, like a shift in the wind before a storm. The first warnings were almost imperceptible. At a Wednesday morning briefing, Emma observed a coolness in the air. Team leads exchanged loaded glances, and conversations grew notably more guarded when she entered a room. Her instincts, sharpened by years in high-stakes environments, told her these weren't the after effects of stress, but the marks of something deeper: competition, and perhaps resentment, simmering among key figures across the organization. Corporate politics in a company as ambitious as Titan Tech were nothing new. Power struggles and alliances had always ebbed and flowed on the executive floor. But now there was an unfamiliar edge to the maneuvering, more covert and calculated. Rumors about her leadership, once rare, began to circulate quietly, some hinting
can't
that
do
the
that. It's
Aurora
too risky.
success was due more to technical luck than vision. Emma addressed these as professionally as she could, meeting skepticism with
Can you
transparency.
explain this
But the
discrepancy?
persistent whispering gnawed at her focus. Behind the scenes, Lucas Miller seemed busier than ever. Where he previously collaborated openly with Emma, he now held frequent closed-door discussions with certain project managers and division heads, often excluding her from informal updates. At first, she chalked it up to the post-launch whirlwind, but the pattern was undeniable. Lucas was assembling small circles of influence, cultivating closer ties with people who had once reported directly to her. A trusted product designer confided that Lucas had been critical of Emma's overbearing style in private meetings, something it never would have suggested before.
I assure you, my
Simultaneously,
involvement in that
the flow
project
of
was purely
information
advisory,
to Emma's
with no
office
direct access to
slowed.
the financial records.
Reports and memos that she expected each morning sometimes arrived late or incomplete, if at all. During one
careful.
product review, a glaring data discrepancy caught her eye. On investigation, she found that key numbers had been quietly adjusted. Nothing illegal, but just enough to mask a sharp downturn in user retention. It was the first time in her career at Titan Tech she questioned whether her own teams were withholding the truth. Adding to her unease were a series of strange coincidences. Confidential strategy documents leaked to the press with unattributed sources, a planned panel appearance abruptly canceled due to unforeseen pushback, and anonymous emails warning her to watch your back. Someone's aiming higher than you think. Though Emma had weathered plenty of professional storms, these shadowy threats carried a different weight, punching through her careful confidence and making her question who she could truly trust. Emma responded by tightening her inner circle. She began to discreetly reach out to long-standing allies beyond Lucas, listening for subtext in casual conversations, double-checking details others took for granted. Some colleagues met her questions with genuine concern. Others seemed nervous or evasive, as if afraid of being caught on the wrong side of an evolving power play. Amid these mounting pressures, Emma struggled to keep her usual clarity. Her public facade remained unshakable. Sharp suits, calm voice, unwavering optimism during status meetings. But the stress of uncertainty pressed on her sleepless nights. For the first time since joining Titan Tech, Emma felt alone at the top, surrounded not by supporters, but by opportunists whose loyalties were as fleeting as the market itself. As Friday dusk settled over Manhattan, Emma stood by her office window, watching the city lights flicker on. She recognized the loneliness behind her reflection, the burden of leadership complicated by suspicion and betrayal. Though she had always told herself that resilience grew strongest in adversity, Emma now sensed that to protect all she had built, she would have to fight in ways she'd never imagined. In the gathering darkness, the spotlight faded and real shadows gathered. The true test of her ambition was only just beginning. The fateful fall Friday morning arrived with a sense of foreboding that Emma could neither shake nor rationalize. By now, the tension at Titan Tech was palpable. Hallway chatter abruptly silenced when she passed by. Emails arrived, missing attachments or clarification. Every move was met with an invisible, watchful scrutiny. Emma tried to meet these obstacles with diligence. She demanded precise numbers, set up impromptu meetings, and pushed for open communication. But the harder she tried, the more resistance she seemed to encounter. The full scope of the conspiracy revealed itself with chilling efficiency. It began when Emma was summoned to an extraordinary board meeting. No agenda given, only a terse request for immediate attendance at the top floor conference suite. The usual pre-meeting camaraderie was absent. Members of the executive team barely met her eyes. Lucas was already present, sitting closer to the board chair than protocol would normally allow, surrounded by a small coterie of allies. As Emma took her seat, the general counsel began reading aloud a litany of accusations, allegedly falsified metrics, evidence of mismanaged funds, internal complaints of a toxic culture under her direction, and even claims of intellectual property theft. Each point was accompanied by documents, emails, and damning signatures, many of which Emma had never seen before. Lucas, with studied reluctance, said he was heartbroken to have uncovered such evidence, but that he owed it to the company to speak out. Emma found herself battling waves of disbelief and outrage. She protested each charge, demanded a chance to explain the inconsistencies, but every rebuttal was dismissed. Crucial files from her email were missing. Messages had been altered. Her calendar reflected meetings she never attended. The trap had been sprung with cruel precision. The room's atmosphere devolved into something adversarial and cold. Senior board members referenced anonymous employee complaints and pointed to market volatility as justification for swift, decisive action. Only a few faces showed traces of sympathy, but none dared defend her. Lucas, meanwhile, masked satisfaction with concern, using words like transparency and accountability to cloak his maneuver in moral righteousness. The verdict was delivered quickly. Effective immediately, Emma was to be relieved of her duties. Her company accounts suspended, pending investigation.
But she knows.
She was quietly escorted out of the boardroom, through back corridors, away from the main floor, under the guise of protecting both her privacy and the company's reputation. The hours that followed passed in a haze. Rumors exploded across internal chat boards and social media. Friends stopped returning her calls. Overnight, Emma Carter's name, once synonymous with innovation and integrity, became a buzzword in industry gossip columns for alleged misconduct. Her personal finances heavily tied to her Titan Tech stock and incentive pay, took a catastrophic hit as shares dropped in response to the scandal. Sponsors and media contacts who had celebrated her days earlier now pulled back, wary of the ongoing investigation. For Emma, the betrayal was as much emotional as professional. Lucas, not just her star deputy, but her confidant and sounding board, had led the charge. Even as she sat alone in her quiet, elegant apartment overlooking the city, Emma replayed every recent conversation, every overlooked warning sign. Shame gnawed at her. Anger flickered at the edges of her fatigue. Yet beneath it all, numbness prevailed. She was not simply cast aside. She was made into an example. In private, the wounds ran deepest. Her professional identity upended, her social circle fractured, her sense of self cracked by the force of orchestrated humiliation. The woman who once commanded boardrooms with confidence now lay sleepless, haunted by memories of trust misplaced and ambition undone. Rock bottom was no abstraction. It was the cold edge of exile, the humiliation of seeing her life's work twisted and used as a weapon against her. Yet, beneath the ache of collapse, the first flicker of defiance quietly sparked. One day, Emma promised herself, the truth would come to light, ashes and hope. The first weekend after Emma's fall was a blur of cold, gray silence. Her penthouse, once a sanctuary where every book and piece of modern art was meticulously arranged, now felt like a holding cell. The news cycle hadn't let up. Articles dissected her so-called downfall. Anonymous sources weighed in, and social media bristled with theories. On Sunday night, she scrolled through the Titan Tech alumni forum only to find speculation, scorn, and a few faint glimmers of sympathy drowned in a tide of suspicion. Despite the public humiliation, Emma refused to give in to despair. Something deep inside her, stubborn and bruised, but unbroken, insisted that this couldn't be the end. She could indulge her pain for a while. She deserved to. But eventually, she would have to act. It was in her DNA to turn crisis into challenge. She spent her days reviewing every piece of evidence available to her, retracing decisions and projects from the past year. Her lawyer, Jennifer Lee, a sharp, strategic woman who specialized in corporate cases, counseled patients, but also quietly admitted things looked grim. Lucas and his circle coordinated this masterfully, Jennifer said, her face taut on a video call. We need to start from scratch. Assume there are traps in every file, every recorded conversation. Emma nodded, listening and taking notes. Anger mixed with gratitude. She realized she was lucky to still have a few steadfast allies, even if most were forced into silence, for now. At night, sleep offered little respite. Her mind replayed every briefing, every late-night call with Lucas, every moment she ignored her own instincts, when she should have pressed harder or asked more questions. She thought of her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs so Emma could go to college, and the promise she'd made at 21. I'll never let anyone steal what's mine. The edges of humiliation gave way to a steely resolve. By Monday, a plan began to form. Not the details, just the skeleton of intent. The first step was information. She needed to know who had benefited the most from her ouster, who was truly loyal to Lucas, and who might be wavering in the aftermath of the coup. Emma knew that if she acted rashly or drew too much attention to herself, her enemies would tighten their guard. She would have to move quietly, with precision and patience. She started by reaching out to a handful of former colleagues outside Titan Tech, people she trusted, who themselves had left the company in recent years. Over coffee in out-of-the-way Brooklyn cafes, or secure chats encrypted end-to-end, she pieced together fragments of the story. From a friend in HR, she learned that certain complaints against her had been filed from dummy accounts or by contractors with no direct contact. A former product manager revealed that Lucas had courted support through lavish, off-the-books dinners and coded promises of promotion, often whispered late at night after company parties. The revelations left Emma uneasy but determined. She knew she couldn't launch a legal attack yet. She needed real ammunition first. That meant evidence, messages, financial records, metadata, anything that could undermine Lucas's narrative and expose the ring supporting him. Unsure where to start, Emma decided to call on an old acquaintance, Max Rosen, a cybersecurity consultant who owed her more than a few favors. They met on a rain-soaked Tuesday in a cluttered Soho co-working space. Max answered her call for coffee with a nervous smile. He'd followed the news, of course, but didn't ask for details. "You want me to break into Titan Tech?"
Yes.
He joked, only half kidding. "Nothing illegal," Emma replied. "But I need to understand who engineered this, who pulled what strings, when, and how." Max nodded, the kind of nod that said he understood more than she'd said aloud, and agreed to help her analyze publicly available records, social posts, and company filings for suspicious patterns. Over the following weeks, a routine emerged. By day, Emma scoured open-source information, reviewing regulatory filings, cross-referencing social media posts, and studying the digital footprints left by Lucas's clique. At night, she returned to the places, restaurants, conference rooms, anonymous hotel bars, where key decisions had happened. She kept up with her meditation, forced herself to exercise, and reminded herself daily that recovery was a process, not an event. What surprised her most during those first weeks was discovering just how many people reached out quietly to express their support. A supplier who'd admired her negotiating style sent a guarded message of encouragement. A former software engineer shared a set of encrypted notes detailing odd requests from Lucas's team in the weeks leading up to Emma's ouster. Another former executive, now advising a rival firm, offered to introduce Emma to a private investigator skilled in corporate espionage. These gestures made her feel less alone and more convinced than ever that beneath the web of lies spun against her, the truth was waiting to surface. Emma realized she'd have to choose her allies carefully. Some people, good people, were simply too scared for their livelihoods to stand with her openly. She respected that, taking information quietly, recording every name, every insight, in a private digital notebook. There were patterns emerging. Certain emails timed just so, sudden shifts in project assignments, budget approvals processed faster than the company norm by managers close to Lucas. The threads didn't form a whole picture yet, but Emma, ever the strategist, trusted patience. One Tuesday evening, days turning crisp and golden with early autumn, Emma met with Jennifer again at her apartment. The lawyer admitted, "You may never get your old position back, even if the truth comes out, but you can stop them from doing this to someone else, and you can clear your name. Are you ready for this? Because it's going to get ugly. Lucas plays for keeps." Emma's answer was immediate. "He already took everything from me. There's nothing left for him to destroy, except my will. And that, Jennifer, is not his to take. From that moment, the work intensified. Emma began mapping out a list of potential allies still inside Titan Tech, people of integrity who might feel trapped by the new regime or guilty over their part in her downfall. She set up encrypted email accounts and instructed Max to dig deeper into metadata from anonymous messages sent to the press. Together, they found the first solid lead, a pattern of unique identifiers embedded in altered documents that traced back not to Emma or her team as claimed, but to a device registered to Lucas himself. The path ahead was clear but dangerous. Emma would have to proceed carefully. One wrong move and Lucas's network might cover its tracks for good, or worse, frame her for a second round of false allegations. Still, for the first time since her exile, she felt something she hadn't in weeks: hope. Sitting alone in her apartment, the midnight skyline glowing far below, Emma allowed herself a small, determined smile. Every rise is built on the ashes of defeat. Her moment might be lost, but her story wasn't over. Not yet. Investigating in the shadows, Emma learned early in her career that it's not only the open battles that define a leader, but also the ability to survive in the quiet, uncertain stretches when information is scarce and every move holds risk. Even when stripped of everything: title, reputation, financial security, she refused to let her resolve evaporate. If Lucas expected her to simply disappear, he'd misread what ambition looked like, when it burned with nothing left to fuel it but injustice. In the weeks following her fall from Titan Tech, Emma operated discreetly, never remaining in one cafe or workspace for too long, always varying her routines. She became fluent in the art of being overlooked, a woman in business casual tapping quietly at her laptop, a solitary figure with headphones in a corner booth, just another faceless commuter riding the subway between Brooklyn and Manhattan. But under that facade, Emma's mind was razor sharp, hunting for weakness in Lucas's carefully constructed web. Max Rosen, her cybersecurity contact, quickly became indispensable. They established ground rules from the start. No illegal hacking. Emma would win this war clean to truly redeem her name. But they would use every legal digital tool available. Max set up secure channels so their communications couldn't be easily monitored, running layers of encryption through devices Emma kept hidden from her usual contacts. He swept her apartment for bugs on more than one occasion, teaching her to spot signs of surveillance, corporate or otherwise. Their first breakthrough came through data mapping. Max ran public corporate filings and internal regulatory disclosures against changes in departmental leadership. Something odd emerged. In the final months of Emma's tenure, teams reporting directly to Lucas had received sudden, unprecedented budget increases, far eclipsing those of similar divisions. That alone wasn't enough to prove malfeasance. But when Emma recalled which teams had been most vocal against her in the end, there was considerable overlap. Meanwhile, Emma quietly re-engaged her most trusted former colleagues, starting with Priya Shah, an ex-financial analyst who'd left Titan Tech last year on amicable terms. Priya specialized in reading balance sheets for inconsistencies. At Emma's request, she pored over public records and employee payment logs, flagging bonuses and transfer payouts too generous to match established policy. The discoveries hinted at off-the-books incentives, hush money, perhaps, or loyalty, bonuses doled out by Lucas's inner circle. Piecing together fragments, Emma built a timeline of the coup, a series of seemingly unrelated departmental shakeups, an abrupt resignation from HR, the silent sidelining of two ethics committee members, odd rumors about a major vendor contract began to align. Emma realized anew that Lucas's conspiracy had started long before the Aurora project. He'd spent months undermining safeguards, rerouting authority, and bribing or intimidating people as needed to clear his path. Emma pursued every new thread, sometimes hitting dead ends, but always learning something. She would accept meetings in unmarked cars or in the back rooms of noisy midtown diners, purposely choosing chaos to mask seriousness. One frazzled former engineer, eyes darting nervously, handed Emma a flash drive and whispered, "They wanted us to falsify performance benchmarks before the contract review with the feds." I walked away, but others couldn't. The flash drive contained detailed logs, time-stamped emails, strong corroboration that Lucas had manipulated technical evaluations and potentially misled federal auditors. Max brought in another ally, Lydia Nguyen, an independent digital forensic expert. Lydia's specialty was tracing digital footprints, identifying the subtle fingerprints left when someone anonymizes leaked documents or wipes records on corporate servers. She unearthed data showing that files used to orchestrate Emma's ouster, memos with fraudulent metrics, poisoned audit logs, had originated from devices registered to Lucas's administrative assistant. But the timestamps revealed those devices operated outside normal office hours, likely by someone with higher access credentials. Emma instantly suspected Lucas himself. There were physical clues as well. Emma combed through her personal possessions, looking for anything Lucas's camp might have tampered with during the messy transition period. Her company phone, handed over in a rush the day she was forced out, came back to her with the help of an IT sympathizer who discreetly returned it after a required internal sweep. On it, a hidden folder contained draft emails warning Emma of irregularities, messages she never saw, likely intercepted and held back at a critical moment. As her body of evidence grew, Emma carefully cataloged every document, log, message, and testimony. Every file was duplicated, encrypted, and stored in cloud drives with complex access protocols known only to herself, Max, and Lydia. She knew the risk. Lucas would do anything to keep these secrets locked away. If even a hint of her investigation leaked back to his camp, he might accelerate a cover-up or fabricate a new scandal to further discredit her. Caution was not just wise. It was survival. Emotionally, the work was draining in ways Emma hadn't expected. The isolation of late nights, cross-referencing obscure data points, was compounded by the knowledge that every former friend or colleague she contacted might, unwittingly or not, tip Lucas off. Even so, these moments revealed surprising courage from others. Priya risked blackballing in the industry by helping Emma. Lydia and Max, with sterling reputations of their own, staked their names and possibly their careers to support her relentless quest for the truth. Emma also found strength in small wins. On a chilly Thursday, early morning sunlight barely peeking over Manhattan's skyline, Emma received a message, anonymous, yet clearly written by someone inside Titan Tech, still loyal to her. It contained a list of security badge access logs for executive areas around the time key documents had been forged. Among the names who appeared at odd hours was a senior compliance officer, until then, believed to be above suspicion. Emma began to see the full extent of Lucas's reach. His coup wasn't just about removing her, but about installing a regime where silence and loyalty were rewarded above competence and ethics. But she wasn't content with defense alone. Emma pushed for offense. With Lydia's help, she reviewed media outlet leaks about the Aurora Project's alleged failures and discovered patterns linking the anonymous sources to smartphones belonging to Lucas's close associates. The stories that had painted Emma as a reckless leader were not mere rumors. They were a coordinated media campaign, seeded with selective truths and outright fabrications. By cross-referencing public relations, firm invoices, and confidential emails, Emma identified payments made to third-party consultants responsible for planting negative stories right before the board's emergency session. Through all of this, Emma never lost sight of her goal. It wasn't just about vengeance, or even about clearing her own name. Though both drove her on dark evenings, it was about restoring faith in something larger than herself. Titan Tech had once been a place of possibility, innovation, and hope for the underdog. Now, it was at risk of becoming just another cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. She owed it to everyone, past and future, to try to salvage what could be salvaged. By the end of the month, Emma, Max, Lydia, and Priya had amassed enough preliminary evidence to envision a path forward. The case against Lucas and his inner circle was growing clear and damning by the day. But to ensure it couldn't be swept under the rug, they would need undeniable public proof and the courage to present it at precisely the right moment. Their work wasn't finished. In truth, it had only just begun. Standing at her window one night, as city lights shimmered below, Emma felt the old fire sparking inside her chest. What Lucas and his conspirators hadn't understood was that ambition, when cut down, does not die. It retreats, regathers, and adapts to the dark, preparing for its return to the light. Building alliances, Emma never saw herself as a lone warrior. Even in the loneliest stretches since her fall, she clung to the conviction that real change, real redemption, could not happen in isolation. Titan Tech's sprawling web of talent, ambition, and history wasn't shaped by individuals acting alone, but by shifting constellations of trust and shared purpose. If Emma was going to challenge Lucas and his loyalists, she needed not just evidence, but an army, however scattered and frightened it might be. Her first priority was to map the true landscape of loyalty within the company. She and Max spent hours cross-referencing their data, access logs, expense accounts, internal communications. With the testimonies from Priya and Lydia, patterns soon emerged. Certain high-level invest managers, by all outside appearances, faithful to Lucas's new regime, had grown noticeably quiet on company channels since the coup. Others, once openly critical of Emma, now avoided public comment altogether. There were subtle signals: a sudden halt in congratulatory messages to Lucas, hesitation at strategy meetings, even the way some avoided eye contact as he passed. Some connections could only be explored in person. The first was George Bryant, Titan Tech's long-serving chief financial officer. In his early 60s, George was respected for his methodical intellect and old-school integrity, traits that had survived several shakeups at the company. He was also someone Emma had personally persuaded to stay at Titan Tech during her tenure, reminding him then that the right kind of ambition can still change this place for the better. She hoped her words still meant something. She arranged a discreet breakfast with George at a hotel coffee lounge far from the financial district. When he arrived, gray-suited, carrying the weary gravity of someone who'd lived through too many crises, Emma was reminded of how different leadership could look when it wasn't driven by ego. As she recounted her findings and quietly floated the risk Lucas posed, George listened in silence, his only reaction the subtle tightening of his jaw. "I've suspected something was off," he finally said, voice so low Emma had to lean in. "Budgets have been shifted, authorizations fast-tracked through back channels. But the board's split right now, Emma. Most people just want stability, no matter who delivers it." He paused, searching her face with a hint of the old camaraderie. "Convince me you have something more than hard feelings. If I'm going to stick my neck out, I need certainty, not just suspicion." Emma met his gaze, and for the first time since her disgrace, felt that cautious hope wasn't misplaced. "You'll have it," she promised. She couldn't yet show him the full dossier, but she described the mounting digital trail, the pending forensic audits from Priya, and Lydia's work tracing document origins. George didn't pledge immediate support, but agreed to quietly sound out a few trusted board members and watch for signs of shifting loyalty within the company's upper ranks. Her next meeting was markedly different. Dina Lynn, the current head of human resources, was sharp, pragmatic, and ruthlessly protective of her teams. Emma worried Dina might have already thrown in her lot with Lucas, or worse, simply decided not to care who won the current war. But Emma also remembered that Dina, while often blunt, had always respected transparency and detested any leadership games that compromised employee welfare. Their conversation, held on an evening walk through a riverside park, was tense at first. Dina questioned Emma's motives, then her tactics. "If you're here to ask me to leak confidential HR files, walk away now," Dina warned. Emma shook her head, explaining she wanted only the truth, evidence that claims against her had been manufactured, not manipulated. Dina surprised her with a grudging admiration, admitting, "Lucas's people have been unusually aggressive about performance reviews and internal complaints. If you bring me tangible proof, I can help. Would you testify?" Emma asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. Dina thought for a long moment. "For the truth, yes, but not for your personal redemption. I care about the people at Titan Tech, not politics between you and Lucas." Emma respected the answer. All she needed was one honest ally at a time. Week by week, the circle broadened. The clandestine group now loosely coalesced through private calls and encrypted group chats grew to include Marisol Vega, a senior engineer who knew Titan Tech's back-end systems better than anyone. Ronnie Bell, a marketing chief whose contacts with the press could help control the narrative when the time came. And an anonymous tech on the IT compliance team, known only by the code name Delta, who proved invaluable in tracking deleted and altered server logs. Emma soon learned that alliance building was an act of constant calibration. Some, though sympathetic to her cause, requested plausible deniability. Others agreed only to provide data, never to appear in any confrontation. A few, like Marisol, volunteered to dig deeper, running ghost background checks on recent hires or flagging strange changes in system permissions within the central servers. Late nights blurred into early mornings as Emma and her core team began building not just a case, but a plan for how to present their evidence when the time arrived. There would be only one chance to turn the tide at Titan Tech, and it would have to be at a board meeting one where the outcome would depend not only on facts, but on the courage of those willing to speak them aloud. As her operation grew more ambitious, Emma took no unnecessary risks. She checked for surveillance each time she met with an ally. Max continued to monitor cyber threats, warning her when any hint of abnormal tracking surfaced on her phone or email. Lydia encrypted and tripled backup all digital files, and Emma herself kept scrupulous notes, logging who knew what and mapping the threads of trust that crossed the company's tangled hierarchy. The most anxious, and perhaps most emotional, alliance Emma rebuilt was with a friend she'd once mentored, Aaron Givens, a division head whose apprehension nearly kept him silent. When they finally met, he confessed, "I'm scared, Emma. I have a family. Lucas is ruthless. You know he'll ruin anyone who stands in his way." Emma stared at him, understanding in her bones what it meant to risk everything. "I won't ask you to stand in front of the mob alone. All I need is your truth and your willingness to stand with us if we can prove everything." Moved by her steadiness, Aaron finally agreed, on the condition that every step be documented and that, should the plan fail, Emma personally take responsibility for shielding those who tried to help. She agreed without hesitation. Piece by piece, an improbable alliance was taking shape, diverse in backgrounds, skills, and motivation, but united by the conviction that Titan Tech deserved better than fear and manipulation. Emma became both strategist and confidant, absorbing each ally's anxiety, struggle, and hope. The coalition thrived in secrecy, but drew strength from something more powerful: the belief that justice, however embattled, was possible. As autumn deepened and the city's avenues flashed with golden leaves, Emma gazed out at the glittering skyline and felt, for the first time since her exile, purpose stronger than survival alone. She was no longer fighting just for herself, but for the future Titan Tech could still become. Around her, alliances old and new were awakening, and with each one, Lucas's grip loosened, and the tremor of coming change grew. The counterattack trap. The team had spent weeks in shadows, gathering fragments, forging a case from whispers and encrypted trails. Now came the most dangerous phase: unmasking Lucas and his circle without warning them, and turning the weapons of deceit back on those who wielded them. Emma knew that in high-stakes corporate warfare, the difference between a successful counterattack and total ruin lay in timing, precision, and unwavering nerve. Every morning, Emma repeated her ritual of caution. She checked for tails on her subway rides, changed devices for each encrypted call, and only used trusted, rotating meeting spots. Max maintained constant surveillance on digital threats, flagging any suspicious activity: a login here, a ping there, a file altered half a world away in a place that should have been asleep. Lydia, their forensic expert, set new traps within the company's system to monitor for last-minute leaks or attempted data wipes. The tension within their ranks mounted, as adrenaline, fear, and the distant hope of restoration fused into a volatile mix. The plan was both bold and delicate: to expose Lucas's web of corruption through a combination of documentary evidence, coordinated testimony, and a coup de grace that not only cleared Emma's name, but shook the board out of its complacency. No single revelation would suffice. Only a cascade of truth, impossible to ignore, could force real consequences. Each ally had a role to play, and any faltering could end with ruined careers, or worse, reprisals that would follow them for years. Emma's heart pounded each time she connected with a new contact. Marisol, the systems engineer, was first to sound the alarm. Lucas's compliance team was preparing an emergency purge. He knows something is coming, she warned one late night as code scrolled across her screen. They're erasing audit logs from the past.
Quarter and switching access credentials. There's a spike in encrypted file transfers. Could be blackmail material. Or prepping to scapegoat someone else if things go sideways. Swiftly, Emma pulled her allies together for a midnight call. The digital war room was tense, but focused. Priya had already duplicated key financial documents. Ronnie had prepped a press kit in case viral exposure was needed. Max and Lydia coordinated to clone the remaining company logs in real time, vaulting them to triple encrypted cloud servers. Emma's voice was steady as she laid out the next steps. We can't wait any longer. Tomorrow, we go to the board. The danger was more than theoretical. Earlier that day, Aaron received an unmarked envelope at his apartment. Inside, photos of his family at the park, with a threatening note. Stay out of it. Delta, their IT mole, reported attempted breaches into the secure chat channels and efforts to trace unauthorized badge scans late at night. For Emma, these were grim reminders. Lucas and his enforcers were ruthless, willing to exploit any weakness, personal or digital. Yet the fear only steeled their resolve. The night before the board's quarterly review, Emma and Max ran through their data chain one last time, scrutinizing every timestamp, digital signature, and message trace for ambiguity. Lydia rehearsed her technical presentation, simplifying jargon so even the least technical board member could grasp the fraud. Dina, from HR, agreed to appear in person if the rest of the plan went smoothly, lending procedural authority to their claims about manufactured complaints and intimidation. Ronnie and Marisol finalized their talking points. Calm, factual, irrefutable. Emma herself could barely sleep. She paced her apartment, replaying the entire arc of her career. Every victory, every mistake, every moment where pride or exhaustion had made her blind to the tides shifting beneath her. No amount of plotting could remove the risk. The reality that at any instant, the board might choose the safety of denial over the disruption of accountability. What weighed on her most was the risk to her allies. She composed a message to each one, promising to shoulder public blame should their plan collapse. On the morning of the meeting, the autumn air was brittle and sharp, as if the city itself anticipated upheaval. Titan Tech's boardroom was sealed tight, surrounded by glass, polished wood, and hushed tension. Lucas radiated confidence, greeting attendees with the calm of someone who believed every contingency had been mapped. There was even a faint smirk when Emma walked in, flanked by George Bryant and Dina, with Ronnie and Marisol trailing discreetly behind. The official agenda featured nothing unusual: quarterly revenue, regulatory filings, new product pitches. But Emma had secured an emergency addendum by convincing George and two other board members of the gravity of her evidence. When her turn came, she stood, voice clear but brimming with quiet fury. Before any further decisions are made about Titan Tech's future, she began, I request this board's attention for a matter of urgent internal security and executive ethics. What I am about to present is corroborated by independent forensic audits, first-hand testimony, and cross-validated technical records. A hush fell over the room. Lucas's hand
tightened around his pen. Emma started with the timeline. The slow, systematic shift in departmental oversight. The flow of unaccounted budgetary bonuses. The manufactured complaints registered from shell accounts. Lydia's slides detailed how server access patterns, data tampering, and credential overrides fit a pattern leading directly back to Lucas and his core team. Real-time screen recordings, secure access logs, and audit trails appeared on the projection screen. Names, timestamps, locations. Simultaneously, Priya explained the shadowy payments. Funds moved through obscure vendor channels that matched the bonuses paid to key conspirators. At each step, Emma called on a different ally. Marisol mapping network changes to the week of Lucas's key moves. Aaron bravely confirming manipulated performance appraisals that forced out whistleblowers. Dina certifying the process gaps in HR protocol. The evidence was overwhelming, and each detail built atop the last, with the steady inevitability of a rising tide. Lucas shifted tactics, first deflecting. This is nothing but the complaints of a disgruntled former director, then resorting to outrage, accusing Emma's team of sabotage. But Lydia was ready. She played a segment of digital logs showing Lucas's credentials, authorizing the very late-night purges Marisol had warned about. The timestamps matched Delta's security badge logs perfectly. Hard proof. The boardroom seemed to shrink, the old guard now transfixed, the newer members pale and furious at their own vulnerability. Emma braced for a final backlash.
Be careful.
But Lucas's facade finally cracked under the weight of public, methodical truth. The hardest part was staying silent as the board deliberated. Emma stepped out with her allies, clinging to each other in the corridor, exhausted but alive with the electricity of having risked everything for this moment. Texts buzzed in. The narrative was already spreading, with trusted journalists being quietly briefed and sympathetic employees sending cautious notes of thanks. If their plan held, Lucas's reign was over. If not, she would at least have made the truth impossible to bury. As the sun dipped behind the midtown skyline, Emma looked each ally in the eye, thanking them for their courage. In standing together, they had not only rewritten her story, but dared Titan Tech to imagine a future free of shadows, a future where the cost of truth no longer outstripped its value. The truth unveiled, the hushed boardroom, still humming with the aftershocks of revelation, felt like the eye of a storm frozen in glass and steel. For a full minute after Emma's presentation concluded, no one dared speak. The powerful, carefully packaged evidence, digital logs, payment trails, forged messages, and brave testimonials hung in the air, undeniable. Many board members sat rigid, faces drained of color. Others glanced at Lucas, his composure unraveling, sweat beading at his brow. Emma's heart pounded, as if trying to break through the stillness. But on her face, she wore only the poise of total resolve. Lucas was the first to break the silence, but his usual confidence was gone. He launched into denials, claiming a coordinated frame-up, suggesting rival companies could have forged logs, even implying Emma's allies were trying to destabilize Titan Tech for personal gain. His words sounded brittle, frantic against the steady evidence. When Emma's team quietly called out the next slide, security badge logs and system timestamps directly matching his access codes to midnight purges, his voice faltered. Others avoided meeting his gaze. Chairman Feldman, who'd presided over more Titan Tech crises than anyone, slammed his palm lightly on the table, silencing Lucas. "That's enough," he said, his voice the heavy timbre of justice long delayed. He looked first at Emma, then the assembled board, and finally at Lucas. "We owe it to this company, its people, its reputation, to get to the bottom of this, wherever it leads." An emergency closed-door session began almost immediately. Board members questioned Lydia and Max in detail, double-checked documents, and cross-referenced the provenance of every claim. They grilled Dina on HR protocols and pressured Priya to walk them through the financial chains step by step. At no point did the integrity of the evidence seriously crack. Outside, Emma and her allies waited in tense, exhausted silence in a side hallway lined with glass trophies from Titan Tech's earlier triumphs, a sobering reminder of what could still be lost. Aaron, haunted by threats to his family, wrung his hands, while Marisol let out short, brittle laughs, unable to manage the electric anxiety that threaded the group. Emma comforted them as best she could, but her own thoughts jostled restlessly. What if the board chose safety over truth? What if Lucas managed to wriggle out, to scapegoat someone further down the chain? Text messages from sympathetic employees and a handful of brave journalists began arriving in her inbox. "You did the right thing. If anyone can bring light to this company, it's you. I hope justice wins." Small notes, yet each felt like an ember, making it possible for Emma to stay present, terrified, but unbowed. After nearly 2 hours, the conference room doors finally opened. Chairman Feldman's grim visage appeared first. Behind him, the other board members, some shaken, some red-eyed, but all altered by the gravity of what they'd seen. Lucas trailed at the back, expressionless, hands clasped in tight fists. No one offered him comfort or defense. "Ms. Carter," Feldman intoned, "the board convened a vote based on the overwhelming body of evidence you and your team provided. Effective immediately, Lucas Miller is relieved of all executive responsibilities and placed on leave, pending the outcome of a full internal and legal investigation." Emma felt the room exhale. Even some of the board members seemed surprised at the finality of it. But Feldman wasn't finished. "This scandal has revealed not just the failings of one man, but deep flaws in Titan Tech's oversight. We owe you, and the entire company, answers and amends. An independent forensic audit will begin this week. Key staff identified in your materials may also be placed on suspension. And we will re-examine the departures, promotions, and demotions from the past year." Lucas, white-faced and defiant, shot Emma a glance filled with both hatred and begrudging respect. Security was quietly called. Without ceremony, Lucas's ID was deactivated. As guards accompanied him to retrieve his personal effects, silence followed in his wake, a silence thick with the end of an era. The next 24 hours at Titan Tech passed in a blur of stunned recalibration. HR, legal, and security teams worked overtime. In leaked memos, the board acknowledged Emma's evidence and apologized for their own failure of vigilance. Some employees wept openly. Others celebrated behind closed doors. An impromptu gathering occurred that night at a local bar, unofficial and secretive, where supporters delivered toasts in Emma's absence, afraid still to be too public, but emboldened by change. For Emma, the lifting fog revealed an emotional landscape more complicated than victory. Vindication was counterbalanced by grief. She mourned the people hurt under Lucas's regime, the ethical lines trampled, and her own lost innocence about how easily narratives can be weaponized. Alone in her apartment as evening approached, she stared at the city's pulsing skyline, reminding herself that justice never repairs all wounds in a single strike. Yet, hope arrived in unexpected ways. Colleagues she feared lost forever reached out. Priya was offered her old post with prestige and a promise of protection. Marisol was finally asked to lead a critical engineering project.
It's too risky.
Even Aaron, after a tearful family dinner, told her, "You didn't just save yourself. My kids get their father back." Titan Tech's alumni started flooding social media with stories about Emma's true leadership, painting a counter-narrative to the scandal, one hashtag at a time. Journalists who had once relished reporting on Emma's downfall now chased after interviews about her courage and the systemic rot she exposed. Her lawyer, Jennifer, was inundated with requests for comment, grinning for the first time in weeks. "You made history, Emma," she whispered on the phone. "Now the world sees why you fought so hard." The next board meeting was streamed to employees company-wide for the first time ever. Emma was invited, not as a supplicant, but a central voice in evaluating what came next for Titan Tech. Standing in that glass amphitheater, she addressed the company plainly. "I didn't act alone. No one ever does, either for good or ill. Titan Tech's greatness was built by people willing to speak up,
Be careful.
to resist fear, to demand that truth and integrity shape our decisions. This is only a beginning." Thunderous applause followed. But Emma knew recovery would be a long road. It always is after darkness. Still, as she looked across faces, old allies, new believers, cautious skeptics, she finally allowed herself to feel pride without pain. The truth had not erased all the scars, but it had stopped the bleeding, giving space for honest healing to begin. And, as she stepped down from the dais, past the board, and into the heart of Titan Tech once more, Emma Carter understood. The storm had broken, but in its wake, the path to something better had finally, at last, emerged. Justice and recompense. The dust of the scandal had yet to settle, but the wheels of justice, slow, inexorable, were well in motion. In the days and weeks following the explosive board meeting, Titan Tech became a company transformed, its corridors christened with new whispers, some of relief, some of anxiety over what else might come to light, but all carrying the undercurrent of long overdue reckoning. Lucas Miller's removal had sent shockwaves through both the company and the industry. Reporters camped outside Titan Tech's offices, hungry for scraps of gossip and fresh leaks. But unlike the initial storm that engulfed Emma, this time, the narrative changed shape. Internal investigation teams, led by a third-party forensic audit firm, swept through emails, contracts, and audit logs with cold precision. Every dollar moved in the shadowy months of Lucas's plot. Every promotional leap and suspicious complaint was scrutinized. It did not take long for more rot to surface. Within a week, Titan Tech's HR department suspended several managers and compliance officers named in Emma's evidence. Investigators uncovered an elaborate system of rewards for those who had enabled the coup, including paid vacations, consulting payouts to family members, and even equity arrangements set up in anticipation of Emma's removal. One by one, Lucas's closest allies fell. Some resigned quietly. Others were escorted out after tense, closed-door meetings. A few tried to turn state's witness, promising testimony in exchange for leniency. The full legal process was grueling. Titan Tech publicly announced its cooperation with state and federal authorities. Emma's name, which had once headlined clickbait rumor columns, now appeared at the center of investigative journalism features on whistleblower courage and corporate governance. A formal apology from the board, signed by Chairman Feldman himself, acknowledged Emma's integrity in the face of unprecedented conspiracy and professional betrayal. For Emma, these acknowledgments brought bittersweet closure. She was asked, at first privately, then publicly, if she would consider returning to direct Titan Tech's recovery, with expanded authority to overhaul its ethics protocols and restore employee trust. For days, she paced her apartment at night, restless and uncertain. The idea of reclaiming the title she had lost, of remaking Titan Tech in her own image, appealed to the part of her that refused to let wounds define her. But another part wondered if true reckoning meant charting a new path altogether. Meanwhile, those who had risked everything to stand with her found their own worlds changed. Priya, Lydia, and Marisol were offered senior roles in the post-Lucas order. Dina, whose testimony had tipped the balance, was appointed to head a newly independent ethics committee. Even Aaron, who had nearly walked away in fear for his family, received both public thanks and reassurances of job security. The courageous became the foundation for a new culture of transparency. Yet the healing process was neither quick nor linear. Some longtime employees, still bruised by months of manipulation and stress, filed grievances or chose to leave in search of fresh starts. The company's stock price, initially battered by scandal, began a slow recovery as confidence returned. But Emma could see the wariness in every investor meeting, every media Q&A. Trust, she realized, was something not just to be restored, but continually earned. The legal repercussions extended far beyond the Titan Tech tower. Lucas faced both civil and criminal proceedings. The details of his financial manipulation and intimidation outlined in painstaking clarity during public hearings. For the first time, he was forced to answer, not just to a boardroom or a hungry press, but to a court of law. His allies, once so bold, folded quickly under cross-examination, and the depth of the corruption became impossible to spin away. Watching the proceedings from the public gallery, Emma felt no pleasure in his downfall, only the gravity of what happens when ambition eclipses conscience. Titan Tech's board, chastened and aware of the price they'd almost paid for complacency, announced sweeping reforms. All whistleblower protections were overhauled. Reporting channels were made anonymous and robust, and a rotating panel of outside advisors was instituted to monitor compliance and organizational health. Perhaps most importantly, the company began a review of all its strategic priorities, vowing that innovation, from that point forward, would never again come at the cost of ethics. Invitations for Emma to speak arrived from all corners, from universities to women's leadership forums to government panels on ethical technology. Her own story was now held up as proof not only of resilience, but of the necessity for vigilance in every institution where power accrues. Still, with each new recognition or request, Emma felt the question pressing closer. What would true victory look like? Could she stand before her team, her board, and herself, knowing she had done more than simply survive? that she had sown the seeds for something new, something better? The answer, she sensed, was not contained in title or public vindication. On a chilly Sunday afternoon, Emma met with Jennifer and her closest confidants in her living room, a space that at last felt like home again, not a fortress or a cage. Worn but steady, she laid out her vision. Titan Tech deserves a future shaped by honesty, not just crisis management and PR campaigns. But maybe my story can stand for something outside these walls, too. She described the idea that had been slowly gathering itself inside her, a place where bright minds who'd been shut out, overlooked, or burned by toxic systems could build openly and ethically, an enterprise forged explicitly around justice, merit, and creative risk. I want to start over. I want to build something from the ground up. This city is full of people looking for a chance and the right foundation. Her allies were silent at first, then smiles broke out, hopeful, excited, and a little scared.
I assure you,
You have our
my involvement
loyalty,
in that project
whatever
was
we
purely
decide,
advisory,
Priya
with no
told her,
direct access to the
voice
financial
unwavering.
records.
If this is the next frontier, let's do it right from the start. By the new week's beginning, Emma delivered her last formal address to the Titan Tech board. She thanked them for their apology, not out of politeness, but because forgiveness was as much for her as for them. She offered to advise the incoming leadership during the transition and left the door open for future collaboration. Her resolve was clear, her gaze unflinching. As Emma left those polished halls, she didn't look back in anger or sorrow. Justice had not been perfect, but it had been real, and its rewards were measured not just in verdicts or press clippings, but in the renewed possibility that integrity might yet outlast ambition. And in the city that had tested her to her core, Emma Carter finally felt the ground solid beneath her feet, ready for the first steps of an entirely new journey. New doors. Emma stood at her apartment window, the first hints of dawn glinting off the skyscrapers in the distance. Manhattan was waking, subway brakes screeching, delivery trucks rumbling below, the city's endless energy pulsing from horizon to horizon. For years, this view had symbolized her ambition, a world to conquer, a proving ground for relentless spirits. Now, after everything that had happened, Emma saw it differently, as an expanse of opportunity, no longer tied to a single company or a single vindication. She pulled a fresh notebook from her shelf, the kind she'd carried since her Ohio days, flipping to the first page. The title she wrote, Ground Up, might have seemed optimistic or even naive to those who had only witnessed her fall. But for Emma, it was both mission and necessity to build something real, honest, and entirely new from the ashes of betrayal. The earliest seeds of her new venture were planted in those quiet days after Titan Tech's reckoning, when the spotlight faded and most of the world was busy moving on. While her name made headlines for a while, Emma kept her own counsel, meeting quietly with the closest veterans of her ordeal, Priya, Lydia, Marisol, and even Dina and Aaron. They gathered at her apartment, at small cafes in Brooklyn, and sometimes in sunlit corners of Central Park, tossing around ideas, frustrations, and dreams. Most of them confessed the lingering wounds of the Titan Tech scandal. Marisol, brilliant as ever, but weary of boardroom politics, said, "If I have to play one more game with insecure executives, I'm out of tech for good." Priya admitted she'd nearly left New York altogether, Even Lydia, a digital forensics expert used to crisis, was tempted by the thought of quiet consulting work. Emma let their exhaustion hang in the air for a moment before answering, "But what if there was another way? What if we built our own company from scratch?
Yes.
No backroom deals, no silent agendas, no traded ambition for ethics?" Skepticism lingered, but so did hope. Priya was the first to lean in. "Okay, but how? How do you keep the poison out? When so much of this industry rewards shortcuts?" Emma's answer was as much promise as challenge. By making integrity the foundation, not an afterthought. Radical transparency,
Our vision
open
is
books,
clear, and
shared
with your
decision-making,
combined talent,
and
we
by
can
making
achieve
sure
something
no one
truly
ever has to fight
remarkable.
alone again. They spent weeks hashing out the blueprint, micro-equity for all staff, rotating leadership panels, an internal whistleblower's desk with real teeth and zero risk of reprisal. Lydia designed digital systems where code, metrics, and even HR feedback would be auditable by any employee at any time. Marisol dreamed up a technical mentorship track, prioritizing overlooked or underrepresented talent. Even the company's legal structure was crafted to prevent any one person from seizing unchecked power. As autumn's chill crept in, Emma's group formally incorporated their fledgling company, Atlas Works. The name reflected both weight and aspiration, a collective meant to carry the burdens of innovation together, not in isolation or secrecy. They worked from Emma's living room, then from a borrowed conference suite above a friend's architect office. There were days when the Wi-Fi sputtered, or when everyone wondered if clients would ever call. But at every setback, Emma's conviction kept Atlas Works afloat. She reached out through her still strong industry network, refusing to let anyone's past, hers included, be ammunition for cheap skepticism. She spoke at local universities about rebuilding trust after betrayal, signed open letters on tech ethics, and answered tough questions from would-be investors without ducking her scars.
It is, but she
Gradually,
knows.
Atlas Works attracted its people, often the ones who slipped through the cracks elsewhere. There was a machine learning prodigy who'd burned out at a unicorn startup, a project manager forced out of her last job for calling out pipeline discrimination, and a hardware engineer passed over too many times for promotion. Each brought a story. Each was offered a vote and a stake. Emma was careful not to let idealism tip into utopia.
Make sure no one
Mistakes were inevitable, and some proposals for transparency threatened to slow actual progress to a crawl. Meetings ran long as the group debated how much openness was too much. There were disagreements, sometimes heated, about salaries, project priorities, and even the snacks in the break room. But each conflict was met not with escalation, but with inquiry. Emma instituted a culture of constructive dissent, making the ability to listen a prerequisite for any leadership role. The company's first project was a secure collaboration platform for hospitals and clinics, a system designed not just for efficiency, but for absolute accountability. Every user traceable, every access request validated, every decision logged. Healthcare clients were skeptical at first, then delighted when Atlas Works built in tools for patient advocates and even allowed independent code auditors. The team's honest approach, even admissions of, "Here's what we don't know yet," became a selling point rather than a liability. By the time winter arrived, word of Atlas Works' philosophy trickled through the tech community. Journalists who once eulogized Emma's career now published profiles of her as a comeback architect. More important to Emma, past Titan Tech colleagues started reaching out, asking if there was a place for them. Some she welcomed immediately. Others she coached on what it meant to start over.
No, I can't
Meanwhile,
do that. It's too risky.
Emma was learning new lessons about leadership. The paradox of trust, she realized, was that it could not be demanded
explain
or
this
even
discrepancy?
measured. It had to be practiced, day by day. Atlas Works was still tiny, vulnerable to market jolts and funding threats. But Emma knew every voice, every worry, every hope within its walls. She felt, sometimes for the first time, that she belonged not to her job or even her mission, but to the people she worked alongside. One brisk evening, as the team gathered to toast their first official round of seed funding, Emma noticed Priya sitting quietly at the fringe. She joined her, asking what was on her mind. Priya replied, "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the betrayal, the backstabbing. I guess it's hard to believe in fresh starts." Emma squeezed her hand. "That fear, that's exactly why we can't fail. Not just for us, but for everyone who ever needed to know beginnings can be honest and fair." Looking around at the Atlas
careful.
Works team, diverse, imperfect, and forging shared intent, Emma allowed herself the rare luxury of contentment. She made a silent vow. No matter how big they grew, or what storms came next, this company would stay true to the values rebuilt through pain. The city outside still glittered with ambition, but now Emma saw something deeper. The power of new beginnings, shaped not by what you've survived, but by what you choose next. Trust, will, and justice were not just her weapons. They were her legacy. And as another day began, her story was no longer about loss or restoration, but the fearless creation of something new.